It's late winter here in Ohio and I can feel spring is in the air. Spring is so exciting, and whenever I think about it, I get butterflies in my stomach. But I'm also hanging on to these last relaxed days of winter because spring on the homestead can be really crazy. Winter is my break, so I'm still making hearty foods and drinking hot tea and hanging on to it as long as it lasts. To me, homesteading is all about moving with the seasons and enjoying every season while it lasts.
This is the time of year that the stuff that we brought down here into the root cellar is starting to kind of show its age a little bit. Things are starting to get some sprouts on them, get a little wrinkly, but there's still a lot of food in here. We're not running out yet. It's still cold outside, it's still winter, but we're getting like 50s, 60s, even up close to 70 during the day sometimes. So even though this room is staying cooler, like the earth here will keep the room cooler, it isn't staying as cold because we're relying on, for some of our cold, to come through this fan right here that I've got, and we have to turn it off, like especially during the day if it's getting warm outside, because we'd just be pulling warm air in here. So we have thought about putting something like a cool bot in here to keep things colder, but as you'll see when we go through some of this stuff here, we still got food and it is still lasting. So we're kind of weighing whether it's worth it or not to have the cost of the cool bot and everything and running it, the electricity for it, versus just doing what we have and maybe saying that it's good enough. So we've still got a decent amount of potatoes, sweet potatoes. These onions here are like 7 months old. They're still looking good. These are usually about the first to go, but we still got some here. We've got these butternut squash here, still looking good. And there's still a decent amount of those left. There is still a lot of white potatoes here, but we got like, it was 4 or maybe even up to 500 pounds of potatoes this year. There was a lot more here. We've used a lot. We're probably gonna end up preserving some of them and giving some to friends and family or whatever. So we still have a decent amount of those left because our potatoes were a bumper crop this year. Sweet potatoes, we're starting to run low on. The sweet potato is just looking so good. I mean, this looks like it came out of the ground yesterday. Especially if you grow some of the bigger potatoes like this. They will last a long, long time. These are months old. As a side note, we've got our maple syrup here. We get it from an Amish farm an hour or so away from here. That is something that someday I'm hoping we can do for ourselves. But we don't have any maple trees on our property, so I'd have to find a neighbor or something that would let me tap their trees. Something I want to add sometime.
These potatoes are 7 months old. I think that's so cool that something will keep in a cold room for 7 months without any intervention on our part. So these right here are the Yukon Gold, and you can tell that once these sprouts are picked off, like this potato looks like new. I mean, it literally looks like new. And these red potatoes here are quite a bit more wrinkly, and they do have more sprouts than the Yukon Gold. So definitely the red Pontiac don't last quite as long, but they still are looking good. And just because a potato is wrinkly and has sprouts does not mean that you can't eat it. There's these like myths floating around on the internet. I have people telling me all the time, oh, you shouldn't eat sprouted potatoes. I have been eating sprouted potatoes since I was like 2. So the only time I would not eat a potato is if it's like moldy or starting to smell really bad, like if it's rotten and mushy and stinky and moldy. Obviously you wouldn't eat that. These potatoes are not moldy at all. They're just a little bit wrinkly. They rehydrate when you cook them. I just put like a tiny bit of water and oil on them when I do baked potatoes. A little update on the virus Y that my Yukon Gold potatoes got. I'm happy to say that it really did not affect the potatoes all that much. I didn't have to throw away rotten potatoes basically. There is a little bit of rot like at the end of the potato, like the potato's belly button where it was attached to the plant. But in the cold room, it never really spread. I just cut it off. I don't feel quite as bad about it as I did this fall. I'm not honestly sure if we're gonna be able to eat this many pounds of potatoes yet before they go bad. we're just gonna have to see once. But there's always this like awkward space in between like late winter and then summer where things aren't coming in from the garden yet, but the root cellar is too warm to keep food in it. So it would be really nice to have some potatoes in the freezer. So what I'm thinking of doing is maybe baking some of these and making hash browns, or even just like cutting them in half, baking them and throwing them in freezer bags so that we can pull them out in that awkward time while we're waiting for things to start coming in from the garden. I don't actually use my own potatoes that I grew from the year before to grow the next year's potatoes. My mom always taught me that it's just best to start fresh with disease-free potatoes. So that's just what I've been doing all of my life. Maybe someday I'll try to save my own potatoes, but especially last year we had some disease for the first time ever with a batch of potatoes, and so I just feel more comfortable buying disease-free potatoes and get a good start. Another thing that becomes very evident this time of the year is that the nice big potatoes last so much better than the little potatoes. It's just like a world of a difference. We still have quite a few carrots left here. Got like 7 bags left. And I can definitely tell through the bags that they're starting to get sprouts on them. They're starting to get kind of hairy, but that's totally fine. I pulled one bag out just to show you what they look like. These carrots still taste great. Often what I'll do, if I think there's a bag that's looking like it might be not quite so good, I'll take all the carrots out, sort through them, and then do some lacto fermentation, things like that, to use up the carrots. But just because there's one rotten one in the bag doesn't mean that they're all bad. One thing that I really want to stress is that when you store food in your fridge, your root cellar, things like that, it's not going to look like your perfect sterile grocery store food. The way that they get food in the grocery stores to look so perfect is by spraying things on them to make them last longer. Homegrown food just isn't gonna look like that. These carrots taste amazing. They're already 6 months old, which is so crazy to me. They last so well in these bags that are taped shut. And if these carrots do end up going bad before we can eat them all, I feel zero guilt about treating my chickens. They need to eat too, and they really enjoy some produce every now and then.
We keep our beef in this freezer right here. I'm sure y'all remember that wild heifer that we got processed not too long ago. That was crazy, but it is really good beef. We have plenty of these cuts left, but not a whole lot of burger. And I do have to admit that that is kind of my fault. When I sent in the processing list of like the different cuts we wanted and stuff, I just wasn't thinking quite right. And we should have not gotten quite as many of some of the different roasts and got more burger. But we are getting a steer from my dad pretty soon, and we're gonna get that one processed probably this next fall. So I'm pretty sure things will last until then. We're still trying to figure out how to get the right amount of beef to last us the right amount of time for the next one, when to raise a calf, when to raise a steer, and all that stuff. Still figuring it out, but at this point, the last one we got, we kept the whole thing for ourselves. She wasn't really big, but it was still a whole beef, but I'm thinking it'll last just about right until we get the next one. The thing about the hamburger is it's something that's like really simple for Michelle to make a quick meal with. You know, some people will throw a frozen pizza in the oven. For Michelle, she fries up hamburgers real quick. It's something easier for the kids to eat rather than like steak and roast and stuff. So definitely want to get more of that next time. And this freezer right here is where we keep our chicken. We've got probably about half of our chicken left, which is just about right. It's time for me to get my broiler chicks ordered for this year. I should have gotten order them already, but pretty sure I've got time for that. So we plan on doing about 55 or so chickens that we raise. We do the Rainbow Rangers. I like those better. Those take longer than the Cornish Cross, but I think they're a better bird. They take about 10, 11 weeks or so versus like 7 to 8 weeks for the Cornish Cross, but they taste really, really good and they do really well on pasture. So if you're ready to get into that, I'd recommend getting the Rainbow Rangers. I get mine from Meyer Hatchery.
This is the freezer that I use to store my veggies and berries in. We have a ton of raspberries left. Like I'm just right here, I'm seeing like 10 gallons, and there's more down in the bottom. We still have plenty of raspberry jam, plenty of strawberries. I love these strawberries for smoothies. This is the time of year when I'm really trying to get all of this stuff used up so that we can put fresh food in here this coming summer, spring, fall, whenever things start coming in. We're not preppers. We just really like to work through all of our food in a year's time. No, we do not. have secret tunnels under our house with large rooms full of MREs. I promise we don't. People say, oh, I wonder how many secret rooms they have full of food. Like, honestly, we just have a milk cow in a garden and a beef cow, and never mind, I'm just gonna stop on that. One of the first things to come in from the garden are broccoli and strawberries, so I really want to work through those. We have tons of them yet. I also still have plenty of butter from when our cow was giving tons of cream this spring. Right now she has a calf, so she's not giving us much cream for butter, so I am thrilled to have all of this butter in my freezer. The kids are getting hungry, it's time for lunch, so I am going to show you one of the things that I really love to do with our strawberries and raspberries. I'm doing tons of this right now to try to get on top of all this fruit. It's time for lunch, and one of the things that I've been making a lot recently is Dutch baby pancakes. We've got a ton of eggs, and my kids are kind of picky with eggs, so I have to disguise them. This is one way that I can use up a ton of eggs, and they really enjoy it, and it's so simple. There's tons of recipes out there for Dutch baby pancakes. I'll just link one in the description box. I think it's called Spending with Pennies or something like that.
By the way, if you're confused by the name Dutch baby pancakes, the way I grew up, we called it volcano pancakes. And maybe that won't mean anything to you, but they're the same thing.
A couple tips for making these Dutch babies. I have a lot of people reach out to me and say they don't puff up. Number one, I have found that whole wheat flour does not work very well for these. I wish it did. I'm not a white girl person. I'm not much of a, I can't say it. I'm not much of a white flour person, but with this recipe, it just doesn't work very well with whole wheat flour at all. The whole wheat flour kind of separates from the egg, and it's still edible. It's just not near as fluffy and crusty and crispy. The other essential for these Dutch baby pancakes is to make sure that your pans are piping hot in a 400-degree oven before you start. And don't skimp on the butter. Use as much as the recipe says, because that's what helps it to not stick. The other important thing is don't overfill your pans. Only put one batch of Dutch baby pancakes per pan. So this is a double recipe of Dutch baby pancakes, so I have 2 skillets. If you put 2 recipes, like a double recipe, into one skillet, they don't poof up. It just gets like really eggy and like a, I don't know, it's just not very good. It's like a rubbery pancake if you do that. When I get my frozen berries out, I just gently drop them on the counter, and they break apart nicely so that you can just pour them. I'm gonna make a really yummy berry syrup to put on top of these Dutch baby pancakes. My kids go nuts over this. I just put these frozen berries on high. I don't have a recipe for this berry sauce. I just wing it. I do a pinch of salt, a splash of juice, and then a little bit of cornstarch in water to thicken it up, and then I put a bunch of maple syrup in. Those are sweet. They're massive. It never gets old, honestly. They're so massive. Be sure to like put the rack in your oven down far enough that the pancake doesn't poof up and hit like the element on top. I've had that happen before, and it's no fun to clean the elements off. Here's the first one. Okay. I don't serve pancakes and syrup normally as a lunch meal. I usually do something like this for a brunch on Saturday morning, but this morning the kids had a savory breakfast and we were running short on time, so this was a really quick meal.
Michelle is going to talk about our canned goods in a little bit, but underneath those is where we keep our bulk goods. We've got cane sugar, rolled oats, black beans, salt, brown rice, popcorn. Popcorn is really cool. You should take a look at this. This is stuff that we actually grew ourselves. It is so simple. It just grows the same as regular corn. You just let it stay on the stalk longer so that it dries out. Store it in buckets like that, and then you just have to shell it when you pop it. But it's so simple and it's so good. Way better than anything you can get from the store. The variety that we grow is called Ladyfinger. If you want to get that, and you can get that from Berlin Seeds. One thing you might have noticed is that I didn't mention flour. We don't have any flour in these buckets down here. Michelle had been using spelt flour in the past for bread and everything because of the health benefits of it. She was having migraines. She thought that maybe whole wheat was giving that to her. But she ran out of spelt and started using some whole wheat flour. We get it in smaller bags, the King Arthur whole wheat flour from Thrive Market. First of all, she didn't notice any health differences. It didn't do anything to her migraines or anything like that. And then also it made much nicer, fluffier bread for her. So now she's really liking that whole wheat flour. So we're still trying to kind of figure out what we want to do with that, which way we want to go with that. So that's why there's no buckets of flour down here. This bucket right here has black beans in it. And this is something we're hoping to eliminate this year. We're planting our own beans in our garden, and we're hoping to fill up our own buckets with our own dried beans this year.
This is the time of year when I'm extra thankful for my canned goods because these here, they can be here for years. I do like to use my canned goods within 2 years or so just because they're the freshest that way. But I don't have to like for sure try to get this stuff used up so that the rest of the stuff, you know, can come in. It's different than stuff in the freezer or things in the root cellar. So I really am thankful for canning, even though it is my least favorite method of preserving, takes the most time. I actually think this shelf is still looking pretty good. Like there's still a lot of tomato products. When I came down here to kind of assess what I need to grow for this year, I was like, wow, you know, did we even eat anything? But like all of these jars here, all of these jars down here, and all of these jars up here are foods that we already ate off of this shelf. And plus, we still do have quite a few months until tomato season. So these are gonna have to last us until like August or something. Last year I had 15 tomato plants. And so this year I think I'm gonna have to cut it back down to like 10 tomato plants because we just don't eat this massive quantity of tomatoes. I'm really excited because maybe I won't have to can quite as many tomato products this year. I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna do as much salsa. The barbecue sauce is going down really fast because my family decided they like barbecue sauce on their pizza instead of marinara. One thing that I am running low in is my dried herbs. I ran out of thyme and parsley and basil and apple mint tea, which is our favorite tea. I still have 2 quarts of the chocolate peppermint, which we'll drink. We just don't like it as good as the apple mint. So I'm really gonna up my game on herbs this year. We also still have a ton of green beans left here. And I'm just not gonna plant as many this year because we still have a whole bunch in the freezer that we need to get through. I feel really spoiled being able to come down here to my basement, eat food off of my canning shelves, eating food out of my root cellar. So even though I'm super excited for spring to get here, I'm also just really savoring these last days of winter.
For more about our homestead life, watch this video next.